So know that even the best AI screening tools can miss really good candidates. And one of the reasons for that is overcorrecting for the inputs that you put in. So in this video, we're going to walk through one of the ways that you can avoid that by adding a manual review track, which is essentially having an additional reviewer go through potential candidates that have been rejected by the AI, just to make sure that you're not biased towards candidates that you don't really want in the funnel. So we're going to jump straight in, and I'm excited to cover this topic with you. So first of all, why do we care so much about having a human track when we're really benefiting from all of the efficiency gains that come with having an AI tool? Well, I think there's three main reasons. Firstly, your false negatives. When you think about the different ways of reviewing candidates, and this happens with human reviews as well, you can get what we call false positives, which means you thought that someone was going to be a good fit, and actually when you interview them, they're not very good. The false negatives are potentially worse because you're actually never going to interview these people who could have been amazing candidates for you because your AI has rejected them early enough in the process that they actually never get a chance to speak to a human. And so that's a really big deal when you're thinking about quality of hire, but also diversity. And as we'll talk about, some of the issues that relate to legal cases when using automated selection tools in the hiring process that may discriminate against certain groups based on age or demographics. And so we want to avoid all of that. Ultimately, false negatives are a bad thing for the review process. The second thing is highly related talent diversity. As we're reviewing candidates that are going through the process, if you train your models based on who's been successful in the past, maybe you only see people that look like the types of candidates that you've had in the past, maybe the same schools, the same kind of career background. Demographically, they're probably going to look very, very similar. So we want to try and avoid that and actually really diversify the top of funnel candidate pool so that we can interview more people, because we know that actually a more diversified overall candidate pool is going to lead to better quality of hire and ultimately a more diverse team internally, which is really important for long-term performance. And finally, data feedback. As we're implementing different AI tools, many of them will actually want some kind of feedback to understand how effective they are at reviewing. If you rely solely on the output of the AI tool, then you're never actually going to know if it's working. And over time, you can get something called drift, where your AI tool gets worse and worse at reviewing candidates over time. And you won't notice that because you haven't added in this human track to really manage the performance. So how do we think about designing the human track? Well, I think there's three main areas again that you want to think about. First, you want to define the scope of what the human track is going to do. So really, like, which candidates are you actually going to defer to the human track? Obviously, if you have 10,000 applications for a role and maybe your AI is filtering out 95% of them and you're going to get 500 candidates actually going to a human reviewer, maybe you want another 500 candidates that the human reviewer will also take that maybe near misses we think about as a pass threshold. Maybe we think about diverting referrals or internal applicants, maybe those that are actually manually sourced by our recruiters who are going on LinkedIn, finding candidates that meet the description that are maybe not necessarily passing their AI test. They say we're going to select reviewers. We don't actually want to just have anyone doing this kind of review. We actually want to have trained recruiters or hiring managers who are actually using a structured hiring process in order to review potential candidates. You may have seen my video on structured hiring. I think it's the gold standard when it comes to making sure that you hire the best quality individuals in a repeatable process. But in here, you just want really a lightweight approach. You want to use the same kind of rubrics that you would normally use downstream in the hiring funnel. Think about it as top of funnel when you're actually reviewing the candidates, and pick people who are trained in the structured hiring process and who you believe are going to actually make effective decisions when it comes to potentially assessing candidates later on in the funnel. And the final thing is we're going to set criteria. So we really want to use the same core competencies that we're training our AI model on. We don't want to ask AI to test for different things than what we're asking recruiters to test for. And best practice is to actually have your core competencies laid out in advance and actually have your AI reviewing based on those. But I think one additional leeway that we may want to give to our human reviewers is to also account for considerations that maybe won't come up in the AI process. So people who are changing careers, who are going from one career path and maybe applying for a role that they have never done before, people who are transitioning out of military and government, especially in 2025, when there's a huge number of layoffs across government. And so you maybe have some really great candidates that don't look like a good fit on paper because you haven't hired anyone like that before, but maybe you want to take a chance and actually interview them just to see if they actually would work out to be a strong fit for your role. So how do we actually run the human track? I think this is where the rubber meets the road. You want to think about what is the actual tactical process for implementing this kind of approach. You probably have your AI screener already laid out. Hopefully it's integrated into your ATS. And so you get a candidate will apply to a role, the AI will score them, and then maybe move them through to the recruiter screen or maybe even a hiring manager screen, depending on how far in the process you're going. I think a great way to implement this is to look at a flag system where anyone who's just under the borderline for automatically moving through to the next stage is flagged for human review. And so you probably want to flex this based on the capacity that you have across the recruiting team. But assuming that you've got enough, you can actually flag enough people that you can actually gain meaningful data and figure out how effective your AI is at reviewing those candidates. The human reviewers then get these new candidates and they will look at the profile and score them against the rubric that the AI is using and come up with an objective assessment. So any passes that the human reviewers make then re-enter the pipeline. And hopefully in your ATS, you have a flag that these people have been manually reviewed. So when you look at your downstream funnel metrics, you can see based on the final round interview, how many of my candidates were screened solely by AI and how many had to have the manual human intervention. This is going to give you some performance metrics for your AI tool and that you're going to want to review later to figure out how effective it is overall. Obviously, if it's available, you can do a lot of this within the ATS or HRIS and just have those things centralized so that you're not scrambling or trying to attach rubrics to meeting invites or sharing over G Suite and trying to figure out what is the kind of the latest version of this tool that we're using. But once you've actually got the data, you then need to figure out how do you actually use it. And so we want to measure the output and then start to integrate that feedback back into the tool. So there's kind of a few steps to go through in this process. Firstly, we want to track how many failed the AI review but passed the human review. And then a follow-on to there is the conversion rates. Based on those human reviews, how many were then interviewed further down the funnel that they actually get to offer? If you look at 15 different candidates and you see that all 15 of them passed the AI test and none actually failed the AI test, you can be pretty confident that your tool is working. If you find that 10 of them actually failed the AI test, but will then move forward with a human, then actually your AI is probably not doing much good in the hiring process right now. And so you can check the effectiveness, maybe think about how you feed those insights back into the tool, maybe change your keyword libraries or speak with your product rep to try and figure out how do you actually implement this and ensure that the tool is adequately supporting the recruiting organization and doesn't become an additional burden when it's actually not delivering any value. So that was it. Pretty quick hit walkthrough, but I hope you found this useful. There's definitely a bunch more videos we're doing on this topic. I'm getting a lot of questions around how do I think about using AI in the hiring process? How does it affect candidates? And with different legislation that's coming through, it's so important to make sure you get this right. Not just because it's important to improve performance and quality of hire, but really you're setting yourself up for regulatory issues if you don't get this right. So please, if you've got any questions related to this topic, please reach out, please comment below. Very excited to hear what you have to say and look forward to doing more on this topic. Thank you.